Okay, everybody, welcome to the Locker Room Chat, the live webinar for members of the Sport for Social Change Network. This is one of a series of webinars that we're hosting once a month to educate ourselves about different aspects of working in sport, and in particular working in sport with young people, where we're trying to do more than just sport. We're trying to affect some sort of social change. So with me today is Dr. Stacey Kratz and Dr. Matt Moore, who are from the both US based. They both work at universities in the United States. Stacey's at the University of Southern California, and Matt is at Ball State University. And they delivered a previous webinar a couple of months ago, which was looking at improving our communication and in sports. And we'll work with players, we work with participants, and the facilitators that do that, whether you're coaches, whether you're peer leaders, whether you're teachers, you have to communicate with the young people you're working with. And so effective communication is very important. And in today's webinar, Stacey and Matt are going to look specifically at the art of listening. So not just talking to the people we work with, but actually listening to them as well. And I think that's really important. If we're going to affect real change amongst young people, then we have to be listening to what they're saying, as well as delivering our messages to them. So I'd like to welcome Stacey and Matt back to the locker room. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Stacey, I think, and we're going to go through their presentation. And at the end of the presentation, I'll come back in again and we'll share for you any questions that you have. If you're wondering who I am, my name is Norman Brooke. I'm a consultant in sport and sport for development. I'm currently doing some work with the African Union Sports Council, providing some technical assistance to them. So that's me, and you've met Stacey and you've met Matt, and I'm going to hand over to Stacey now and ask her to start, and I'm going to sit back and listen like everybody else. The art of listening.
That's great. Thanks so much, Norman. And I'm going to share my screen and bring up our visual aid, so to speak. Let me put it over here. So actually, Matt's gonna send us off.
That's right, Norman. Thanks so much, Zane. Thank you as well for all the technical support that I know you are providing. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're at across the globe right now. I know we've got individuals joining us from across multiple countries and across different platforms, whether it be here on Zoom or on Facebook Live as well. So Stacey and I are beyond excited to be invited back for the second of our 3 locker room chats that we will be doing as part of our collaboration with the Sport for Social Change Network. So for those that were not present on the first time that Stacey and I presented, my name is Dr. Matt Moore. I prefer to go by Matt. I am an associate professor and chair for the Department of Social Work at Ball State University. Outside of my academic position, athletics is a huge part of my life. So I have spent the last 15 to 20 years in competitive coaching as well, at both the varsity, high school or youth level in the United States, and also several years coaching at the collegiate level. Right now I serve as a men and women's tennis coach for a university here in the state of Indiana. So we are thick in the heart of getting our season up and running. So this is not only a great conversation to have, but it's one that I'm going to learn from as I get ready to engage with student athletes on a day in and day out basis for another academic year. So that's a little bit about me. I'll pass it over to my colleague, Dr. Kratz, for a brief introduction, and then we'll get rolling with the presentation.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt. And it's always such a treat and pleasure to work with Matt. We're both obviously deeply connected with the Alliance of Social Work and Sports. Matt is the immediate past president of this organization and serves on the executive team as well as I do. My academic work is at the University of Southern California and the Suzanne Dvorak Peck School of Social Work, just like Norman had mentioned. And I spend an enormous amount of treasured time working with athletes in a clinical practice and also through the Alliance of Social Workers in Sports. And when I say clinical, that means a therapeutic, psychotherapy, and other group and family work, and making strong communities. That's what it's all about, especially in the social work field. We're concerned about social justice, and we're concerned with working with those people that are vulnerable, disenfranchised, and at risk. And we pay particular attention to those people that are suffering through poverty. And that involves all of us, and it involves every community globally. And we're so thrilled to be part of the collaborative team of the Sport for Social Change Network in South Africa. Thank you.
So Stacy and I are excited today to be able to talk about the art of listening. So getting better at building strong athletes in teams. While this sounds at theory that it might be a simple concept, the whole idea of listening, it really is one of the more complex things that each and every one of us does throughout the course of the day. And I think it's safe to say that if we were to all take a step back and be reflective in our stance, that we know the success that we have as individuals, the success that we have with our athletes, as coaches, as members of a team and members of an organization really are based on this basic concept of listening, being able to really hear and to see the nonverbal cues that are being presented to us day in and day out. So we are excited to be able to build on the first conversation that we had back in June. We're also looking forward to our next presentation, which will be in October. So if you love the work that Stacy and I do today, make sure you're joining us again in October for the third conversation that we'll be talking about. But go ahead, Stacy, to the next slide. So we wanted to share our contact information at the forefront of the presentation. Feel free to write down our email addresses. We are always happy to serve as resources to anybody that is attending on Facebook or attending on Zoom. We love hearing from individuals across international audiences and doing what we can to provide support in whatever capacity that might be. So our blood runs deep with this concept of sport for social change and the role that social workers can play within that process. So feel free to utilize our contact information. If you think we can be of help to any colleagues that you have, feel free to share it with them, and we will always do our part to respond and to engage in that conversation. Next thing I want to do a little bit of time talking about is this collaboration that we've entered into with the Sport for Social Change Network. And I think it's really important when we think about this collaboration to begin with where the Alliance of Social Workers in Sports is coming from and why we've decided to reach out to some international partners for collaboration. So I had the distinct pleasure, and it really was a pleasure, back in 2015 of meeting a handful of like-minded social work educators that had a passion for growing this field of sports social work, not only in the United States, but to global audiences as well. What started off as 4 of us that served as sort of the original 4 founding members of the Alliance has certainly blossomed to something that goes, I think, beyond our wildest dreams. So at this point, we're at close to 400 members of the Alliance across North America and multiple other continents. We've got individuals that are engaged in all sorts of sport-based activities from the youth level all the way up to the Olympic movement. And as an alliance, we really focus on 3 primary things. And this is the reason these collaborations are so important to us. Number 1, we want to make sure that we're building a strong network of social workers that have a passion for social justice and the role that sport can play in trying to address some of the vulnerabilities that exist in our world. We believe that social workers and sports really do go hand in hand with each other, and that social workers have the capacity to leave a lasting imprint on athletes, coaches, administrators, and fans of all sports, of all ages, and of all abilities. So that's one thing, is being able to really build that network. We would encourage anybody that is on today's locker room chat to look up our website, www.aswis.org. You can learn more about joining as a member and becoming active in our collaborative partnerships. The second thing, which really embodies, I think, what we're talking about today, is this entire concept of education. So how, as social workers, can we help partner and educate with each other and with like-minded individuals to ensure that we have a firm understanding of what sports social work is and the role that social work can play in trying to help push along social change, to address inequities that exist within this world, and use sport as a platform for good, which we know that it has the abilities to be able to do. The third thing that we look at from the Alliance is this whole idea of advocacy. So how can we utilize our platform and our voice to try to promote various elements of growth within the world? So whether that be right now looking at ways in which we can protect Afghan athletes that are going through the humanitarian crisis that is going on right there. We look at children that are coming from vulnerable populations or might be members of marginalized communities. How can we advocate for their access to sports so that they can learn life skills and positive youth development and some of the other great concepts that many of us were fortunate to learn throughout our athletic careers and still our ongoing engagements that we have within athletics. And we believe that the Alliance, along with the Sport for Social Change Network, these types of collaborations and partnerships really extend that international reach. And it allows for us to have a larger audience and a larger platform to be able to share the things that are near and dear to our hearts and to really maximize the potential that both of our organizations have. So we're beyond grateful to Norman and to the members of the SSCN for their willingness to work with us, not only on this, but on other projects as well. And we look forward to those ongoing relationships in the years to come as well. So let's go over our objectives for today. So at the end of this now, 45 minutes or so that we have left, we want to be able to achieve the following three things. So you have to hold us accountable to make sure that at the end of this, you feel, yes, I met objective 1, objective 2, and objective 3. So number 1, we're going to discover the 3 levels of awareness and self-reflection and why it's so important for listening and healthy communication with athletes. Number 2, we're going to learn 3 critical conditions for effective listening and coaching engagement. And then number 3, we're going to build 3 techniques to use empathy as a motivator in strong athletes and great teams. All right, so we're talking about secrets of strengthening communication today. So there's sort of 3 bullet points here that we're going to talk about, and then I'm going to share a little bit of a personal reflection on how this particular concept of active listening and engagement has really led to strong success with my athletes that I've had the privilege of coaching here over the last couple of decades. So engaging in real dialogue is not just taking turns talking. So, I mean, in order to engage, you really have got to be a consumer of the information that is coming to you. You've got to be able to critically reflect on that information and what is being conveyed, the tone, the mood, the voice, the manner, all the things that go into the spoken words that somebody is delivering. In addition to that, the nonverbal cues that we also can see as we're actively listening and paying attention to what individuals are not only saying, but also what it is that they're demonstrating. Second thing there is it talks about hearing what people mean, not just what they say. So I think it is very safe to say that all of us have got meaning behind our words. So while they might come out of our mouth as words, there's certainly a reason for why we are saying the things that we're saying, and there's a lived experience that exists behind those actual words. And listening at its heart is being able to get to those lived experiences of why somebody is saying what it is that they're saying. And for strong athletes, teams, and organizations, there's nothing, and I really mean this, nothing more important than being able to tune in to what one another are saying. So, I mean, as somebody that coaches a sport that is sort of individual based in tennis, but also has a huge team component, if I am missing something from one of my athletes or I'm not in tune with that athlete on a particular day, that's lost productivity, has lost opportunities to maximize their potential as athletes, and it's also lost opportunities to be able to engage them in critical conversations about not just their athletic capabilities, but the other areas in their life, as far as how they're doing in school, how are they doing psychologically and socially, are their emotions where they need to be, and not being able to pick up on those types of components in the relationships that we have with our athletes is only detrimental to the outcomes that we're going to have from a sport-based perspective. And even more important to me as a social worker is the life outcomes that these individuals are going to have. Coaches have such an immense power in this world, and individuals that are working with athletes to be ever present and to serve as some of the greatest mentor that these individuals are going to have in their lives. I think I said during the last locker room chat, and it's a painful reality for anybody that does competitive coaching, I've got 3 kids at home that sometimes I don't see as much as I see my own athletes over the course of the week. And, that's a sacrifice that my family is willing to make, and it's a sacrifice that they understand. But it certainly is a reality that we spend a ton of time with individuals that look up to us in a leadership role, in a mentorship way, and want to feel like they can trust us with the challenges that they have going on within their lives. And, I can speak directly to the challenges, especially that we've seen over the last 18 months, as all of us across the globe, doesn't matter whether you're in Indiana or in South Africa or in Florida or in Australia, all of us have been dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think this art of listening really has come out strong in this pandemic. We look for those silver linings in these types of moments. I think listening is something that all of us have learned to do better as a result of the global pandemic that we're all partners in and trying to work towards an end of it. But I look at, just the fluctuations and the changes that happen from practices being canceled, to matches being canceled, to teams having to go on quarantine, or players having to go on quarantine and being separate from their teammates for extended periods of time. Living in uncertainty is one of the scariest things that I think any of us face. We all like to wake up and have a sense of what's going to happen to us in that particular day. And for the last 18 months, that uncertainty has been ever present and real in our lives. And I think it speaks to the need for us to be able to truly listen to what individuals are saying, so that we're able to stay connected and that we're able to stay in touch through these difficult moments that we're going to face, and that we're not taking things for granted, and instead we're really staying connected to how are our athletes responding to this from a physical perspective? How are they responding from a psychological perspective? How is it impacting their mental health and their well-being? How is it impacting the social relationships that they have? And if we're not taking the time to listen to our athletes and truly look for the meaning behind what they're saying, we're missing those. And it makes, what is a very difficult situation even harder on our athletes. But at the same time, the art of listening can turn a really difficult situation into a lot of teachable moments that are filled with life lessons that will help these athletes grow, not only in their competition, but really grow as global citizens as well. So I am going to hand it over to my dear friend Stacy, who's going to get us talking a little bit about why listening is so important.
Thanks, Matt. And I love coming together in these spaces, because we learn from each other even more, and we learn from the feedback of everybody. And like Norman, how you were saying that you're sharing the PowerPoint and the recording from our previous session and your others locker room chats. So I want to highlight that for everybody as an invitation to look at that recording as well, because it talks about listening, and it talks about feeling good together, feeling great together. And all of that is this skill about building empathy and building ways and utilizing tips and tricks on how you can tune in to other people and kind of move outside of our own head. So the art of listening is really about those good relationships that we know lead to great teams. So in some ways we're speaking to the choir, but in other ways, it seems so simple, and yet we don't have it at the top of our head all the time, because we're in our own heads, because we are all living in tough times, because not one of us goes unaffected by the global pandemic, global issues of race, global issues of poverty, etc. We don't go unaffected. So we're going to tune in right now and think about skills that we need to get to that place where we can be outwardly focused and looking at the person in front of us, or the community in front of us, the team in front of us. So the first thing we're going to start out with is to listen. We need to be aware of where we are in our thoughts, in our feelings, in our behaviors. And that's just really 3 levels of awareness that we call self-reflection. So self-reflection, it's counterintuitive, because we're reflecting on ourselves internally to go outward bound. It creates this space where we're able to be available to our athletes, to open up, to leave other things at the curb, leave it at the door, to really think about, well, my awareness of what I'm thinking about. So thinking about what I'm thinking about what I'm feeling instead of moving through it. And then how do those thoughts and feelings that actually lead to the way that I behave, the things that I do. So self-reflection is an action verb, which is kind of an interesting concept. It takes a lot of practice. So it's not something that just happens like this. We all know the term mindfulness globally. This really is getting at a level of mindfulness, of being aware. Mindfulness has other structures and constructs that are involved with that. But in the art of listening, we're being mindful and aware of where we are personally. And we're looking at 3 levels of these awareness. So let's first talk about the idea of awareness of our thoughts. So how do I actually pay attention to what I'm thinking about and almost disengage from a place where I'm judging my thoughts, like I'm good or I'm bad, or a place of guilt where I say, oh, I shouldn't be thinking that way, or I could be thinking better, or if only I did this, or shame on me that I'm thinking this way. We want to avoid that when we're building our skill of awareness of thoughts. We want to get to the root of what and the why behind our thinking patterns that we've developed through our whole life. Because when we're aware of the way that we think and how those think patterns emerge in our conversations and our interactions with our athletes and the teams and the families and the communities where we play and compete, we can actually start examining how then we react. But if we're not aware of our thoughts, we'll never get to that place, because the way our thoughts have patterned in our lives give us it's a big clue into the way that we think about things. And that leads to our prejudices and our biases, whether good or bad. But unless we actually sit down and say, okay, I'm actually thinking right now about something like, I don't want to get in an argument. That's what I'm thinking about. I wonder why I'm thinking about that. Where did that come from? Or I'm thinking in an interaction with a parent, like I'm thinking about an argument I got in last year and how did that work out? What brought me to this place where I'm actually thinking about it? Or a conversation where I'm having with an athlete, but all I'm thinking about are the team's rankings. Why is that? So when we can be more aware of what our thoughts are, then you're actually building the skill of introspection. And isn't that a goal for all of us, to be introspective about where we are, where we sit, where we are in this relationship, and how we can open ourselves up more for a more helpful place to be for our athletes and the team. So again, we're not using judgment, we're not using guilt or shame. We're just getting to the root of what we're actually thinking. That's a level of awareness. And sometimes these patterns just keep coming back up. And then when we see the patterns, we can see, oh, I wonder where that came from. Okay, so also in that idea about becoming aware of our patterns, it actually brings up this idea of values. And in any relationship, we bring our value system to the table, and what we think is important to us to have a meaningful relationship, a meaningful experience, a meaningful life. We want to reflect on those patterns, because our thoughts and our patterns reflective of what our values are. If we have thought patterns that are in contradiction to what we value, that gives rise to a place of change where we can say, oh, That's not what I want. What I want is something like this. I want to see this type of thing in my life. I want to see this type of activity with my team. It enhances the idea that we're all human and that we all come with a set of values that are instilled from in utero, that start building more and more as we live through this life and play out with our athletes and our teams. So if we become aware of our thoughts, we become aware of the patterns of our thoughts, which gives a bright light onto what we value. And when we get to that place, we're opening ourselves up for change and further deepening of relationships. And that's what it's all about, right? So an awareness of thought is really looking at the first picture. It's naturally, when we do this, it's naturally going to bring us to a place where we're thinking about our feelings, because thoughts come with feelings. And so we want to be aware of our feelings as well in these communication patterns. So look at this shot. This guy's got a lot of feelings going on, huh? He's all over the place, whoop, 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 up and down. So top left, happy. Matt, bottom left, what feeling do you think you would think would that be?
That looks like me at the end of every single day, trying to figure out like what has actually just happened to me today. So I think just a little bit of dumbfoundedness and confusion about what the world is going to have.
Excellent, excellent. What do you think about the one on top of it? What do you think?
That was me just a few minutes ago, critically thinking about what you had to say and about how like important these lessons are for all of us to be reminded of as we approach different groups of individuals throughout the course of the next few days.
Yeah. And I look at that and I'm like, wow, I wonder if he's feeling like almost defensive, like, like in America, we'd say like, screw you, or something like that, right? I don't know. Some of these are like disdain. I'm thinking of silliness. I'm feeling silly. I'm thinking puzzled. I'm thinking dismayed. I'm thinking rage. But when we can tune into the thoughts and the feelings that go with it, we are exploding our sense of introspection, which only can help in building stronger relationships. So we're building this awareness of our feelings and awareness also of our emotional reaction. And in our last webinar in Feeling Great Together, we actually talked a lot about our emotional reactions that just kind of pop up fast and quick. And we have to be careful about that in building strong relationships and having great communication, right? So of course, our feelings are going to be right there on top of everything. So we actually want to get to a place where we start feeling our feelings, that we don't numb them as well. Because we kind of live in a world and a society that asks us to numb our feelings a lot, to just get through. So, we live in a society and a global world that says it's not okay to cry. I've never lived or been part of a society that welcomed tears except in a grieving process, like at a formal ritual for death. Maybe some of you have, but the idea that you can't be too silly, or you can't be too unhappy, or you can't be too happy, or you can't be too happy all the time. That's toxic. Or, we're getting all these messages that your feelings are not appropriate. And yet there's no such thing as a wrong feeling. There's no such thing as that. So when we tune into our thoughts, and we tune into what we're feeling, then we actually start to lose judgment on ourselves as well. So we're distancing ourselves from the shame. I shouldn't be feeling this, or it's not right for me to feel this, or if only I could stop feeling this way. If we can get to that place, we're actually building empathy for not only ourselves, but for the people that we work with and the people that we love, those people that we choose to communicate with. So we're bringing about this awareness of our feelings and recognizing them, and it helps us to deepen our understanding of what others are feeling then too. Because if we're numbing our own feelings, how can we possibly know how other people might feel? If we don't have an understanding of how we're thinking, oh, this is where my thought patterns are. If we avoid that type of introspection, how can we possibly build a strong base of listening? Because we wouldn't know how people are thinking. We wouldn't think about how they're thinking either. Or we wouldn't think about how they're feeling either, because we're not doing the work for ourselves. So our challenge is to open ourselves up to how we are feeling. And there's no such thing as a bad feeling. It is at times a little bit difficult to put a word to how I'm feeling. And also to say, you know, I'm feeling a lot of things at the same time, and that's okay too. So this is skill building to get you to that place for strong communication. This is an awesome graph that I use in clinical practice all the time. It is from 1982. It has stood the test of time. It's empirically addressed. It's called the feeling wheel. And the feeling wheel is Gloria Wilcox's answer to how to increase our emotional intelligence, about how we emote, about how our feelings are actually part of our emotional world that happens inside our body. So if you notice, in the center are the 6 primary emotions. Dr. Wilcox calls them sad, mad, scared, peaceful, powerful, and joyful. And as you move outside the center of the circle, there's 2 other layers of some helpful words to describe what you might be going through in an emotional sense. And they match. So if you're feeling angry, that is because something else is going on. So anger is a secondary emotion. Something happens before that, which is you're feeling mad, or you're feeling frustrated, or you're feeling unheard. You're feeling violated. You're feeling, move it around the circle. You're feeling confused. It makes you mad. Why? When you're thinking about what you're thinking and then labeling what you're feeling, you can get to a place where you're building deep empathy. And that's emotional intelligence, which, Norman, we should do a whole show on that. We should do a whole webinar on emotional intelligence. But with this feeling wheel, and of course you are all going to get copies of this, and all of our slides are yours. You can do with them what you would like. Share widely. Dr. Moore was talking about that. So this inner circle we pay attention to, these 6 segments, and the primary feelings, and then how it radiates out to other feelings we might see. So what leads us to that 3rd level of awareness then is what we do with these feelings and what we do with recognizing our thoughts, and that's our behavior. So awareness of our behaviors, we know how we're thinking about things, anything at all, at any moment, in any interaction about anything. When we are thinking and feeling, it determines what our behavior is. We can interrupt it, of course, so we're not reactive. We can say, is how I'm behaving reflective of the values that I hold? Is it? And when you become introspective and your behaviors are not part of your value system, there's an opportunity for change. And it's an opportunity to grow our awareness and how we live with each other, and how you live with your athletes, and how you live with your teams. Okay, so that's 3 levels of awareness. That's part of a skill that takes a lot of practice. Like I said, it's an action verb. It's about thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and wrapping it all together to place yourself in a world where you become a great listener. Matt, I want to hand it back over to you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So as Dr. Kratz said, really these concepts of awareness with thoughts, with feelings, and with behaviors certainly allow for us as coaches and leaders of various sport organizations to demonstrate these 3 conditions that we're going to talk about regarding effective listening and coaching. Many of these you have heard of, all of them I'm sure you are practicing in your current efforts, and maybe just they're going to learn new language to toss behind them. But we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about genuineness, non-possessive warmth, and then accurate, empathetic understanding. All right, so genuineness is most likely a word that every single one of us is somewhat familiar with in our lives. This really boils down to the fact that for us to be strong leaders, we need to be genuine. What's going on within our inner experiences have to match the outward expressions that we're demonstrating to the individuals that are around us. It boils down to our ability to be real, to be authentic, and to be able to build trustworthy relationships. So, I mean, I use my own personal, coaching philosophy and approach towards my athletes. And what my athletes see is what they know that they're going to see, right? I mean, they know that when I'm out at practice, that when we're in the midst of a competition, that when we're doing just team building activities, that they're going to get the person that I am and the person that I'm proud to be and the person that I feel can best represent the values that I have, the feelings that I have, and the behaviors that I want to model and to demonstrate to other individuals. And I encourage all of you to spend some time in reflection and just thinking, am I consistently demonstrating a genuine message to the individuals that I'm engaging with? Because with that consistency behind genuineness comes an understanding of what your athletes and fellow coaches and administrators can expect, and it allows for that trust to be built within that process. So we'll go on to the next one, to me, which is really at the heart of what I think is, of the 3, one of the most important to be able to really give thought to. And this is this idea of non-possessive warmth. So this is having an unconditional and positive regard and an acceptance for each one of the athletes that we interact with. So, and for this, it's so important to remember that athletes come from all different backgrounds and all different walks of life. So lived experiences that one athlete has is completely different than the lived experience that the other athletes have had. And while there are a lot of things that unite us in athletic settings, we all have a love for a particular sport. We all believe in the concept of teamwork and sportsmanship and leadership. We arrive to those moments in our lives through different channels and through different paths. And this whole idea of non-possessive warmth is really the ability to be able to connect with each one of those athletes, where they're at in their current life and where it is that they're coming from. And by that connection, we're establishing this concept of genuine care, where athletes feel like we don't just care about them because it's our job and it's what we're getting paid to do. We care about them because they are a part of our inner circle. They become parts of our extended family. They become individuals that we admire and that we want to spend time around and that we want to provide sound advice and that we want to provide sound guidance towards. And ultimately, we want them to know that we accept and we value who they are. So no matter what it is that they're going to bring to us, that we want to be there to provide warmth in that relationship and to be able to demonstrate and to provide the support that is necessary. And when I think about the years that I've spent in coaching through this aspect of non-possessive warmth and trying to meet athletes where they are and demonstrating my genuine care for them, I don't know if it's true or not, but I mean, I feel like I've had the opportunity to, in some aspects, save athletes' lives. So, I mean, I've had athletes that have come to me with suicidal thoughts. I've had athletes that have come to me in some of the deepest stages of depression that one can be in. I've had athletes that have come to me and disclosed eating disorders, or that they've been survivors of sexual assault. I've had individual athletes that have come out to me as identifying as a member of the LGBT plus population. I mean, all of that I don't think is possible without a genuine approach and a non-possessive warmth to which athletes feel like they can share things that are going on within their lives. And as coaches, we're all smart enough to be able to understand that if an athlete isn't comfortable with who they are, if an athlete is going through behavioral health challenges, if an athlete is trying to overcome some type of family or personal trauma, they're not going to be able to give us their best in competition, right? They might fake it. They might try. They're going to continue to put in the energy and the effort, but it's not their true self. And if you're not your true self, I don't think that you can ever really accomplish your highest goals when it comes to athletic competitions. And then even more so, you can never really achieve the goals that you establish as a person for what it is that you would like to achieve within your life. So this whole concept of non-possessive warmth and making sure that we're able to really look at positive regard and acceptance for each athlete is just beyond valuable to me. And I found it to be one of the biggest strengths that I have found in coaching. And the last one that we're going to talk about then is this whole idea of accurate, empathetic understanding. So ultimately, you know, athletes are experiencing feelings in a variety of different ways. So it is our goal as coaches to be able to convey to them that we really do get who they are as individuals, that we understand the various identities that they come to with us in life, right? Athletes are not just athletes, right? In my world, they're students, they're members of social organizations, they're members of families, they're members of social groups. They've got multiple identities that comprise who they are. And at any given day, those different identities can impact their perspective on the sport that they're going to be playing. And in order for us to have the most successful practice and the most successful competition that we can, I have to be able to convey that I understand each unique thing that all of these different athletes are going to bring to the table at any given moment, and be prepared to work within the frameworks of what they're providing me to ensure that we can maximize their overall potential. So I'm going to toss it back on to Stacy, who's going to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the aspects of empathy that are important as well.
Boy, I'm just imagining, and I'm thinking in my head about these moments where we're exchanging words, but how much is behind those words, and like understanding where we enter into this conversation, and understanding we're thinking about what we're thinking and about what we're feeling and what are we doing because of those, and then overlaying it with this a sense of genuineness, that we are open to being who we are, even in a vulnerable position, that we are coming into this relationship and this one conversation, even with this idea of non-possessive warmth. And Matt, you nailed this. But you worked a long time to get to that place as well. You've been in coaching for 20 years, in academia for decades, and you've built this skill of non-possessive warmth, and watching boundaries as well. Like, we pay attention to that possessive part because we don't want to cross that boundary. And then understanding, of course, the empathic a stance of accurate empathy, and that comes with understanding who our people are. So a little review about what empathy is, and you can listen to more about empathy in the first version of this, Feeling Great, like we invited you to do before. But empathy is a place where we can start to move conversations and move relationships in a positive way, because we have more understanding of who it is, of who this person is that we're conversing with. So empathy is really about understanding and sharing feelings of another. That's a definition. Empathy is. And when we can do that, we can actually open ourselves up to listening. Of course, empathy is a huge concept. It's a huge concept, and it's been studied. There are famous psychologists, social workers, anthropologists, sociologists. Every discipline is looking at this sense of empathy. But we do know that empathy has really three aspects, and that is this cognitive piece, how we're thinking, the emotional piece, how we're feeling, and compassionate about how our behavior impacts the other person. That is understanding empathy rules in building strong communication. So it's also this idea that we are able to understand and get at what people are or may feel because of the situations that they're in. So sometimes we can even do some predictive empathic listening. If this happens, this might make this person be in this place. And that's a real sense of getting a deep relationship with the people that we're working with. And obviously our athletes, the teams, the parents, if we're opening up this place where we have empathy. So empathy is about engagement. It's a practice. It's also another verb that you have to keep working on. It's not an inherent trait of somebody. Somebody is either empathic or they're not. And if you didn't get the good roll of the dice, then, oh, well, you're never going to have this. It's not like that. It's fabulous. It's very hopeful. It means that we can have a place where we're continually growing and learning about the people that we want to be with, that we genuinely want to be there, that we have an impact, that we are building a place of trust for all of us to open up so that we can understand more. You know, as I'm saying this, yes, we're talking about the sport and athletic arena, but isn't this what life is about? Isn't this what about global concerns is about? Isn't it about every single government action globally? About if we could get to a place of pure empathy, it's going to move way beyond and make our team stronger at the same time. So we're really extending peace when we're empathic. And we are extending grace because we're thinking about how others think, about other experience, about everything that's below the tip of the iceberg that we see. All of that ice that's below the waterline that we can't see that's going on with somebody. But when we're empathic, we can say, they must have feelings about this. I wonder how they're thinking about this situation, about themselves, about how we might want to redirect some of those thought patterns, or how we want to come together and say, this thought or this feeling doesn't comport with the values we have. And so it's an opportunity for change. And when we do that, then we grow strong teams. And that's what we're doing. And when we build strong teams, we build strong communities. And that's what Sport for Social Change is all about in a nutshell. So empathy, encouraging others, is in peace, a state of peace, a state of grace, which builds health. And that's a goal. There's three aspects of empathy that I want to go over real quick. So another more reasons why we want to open up our empathic soul is that it hurts when people feel like they're not listened to. And when it hurts, that means they're going to close down. And when we close down, we don't communicate. And we have lots of feelings around that. And a lot of time those feelings turn into anger. But we know anger is secondary. There's something before that. So building our empathic practice means that we're going to help people not hurt. We're going to help our athletes not hurt. We also know that when we have empathy and when we use that skill of empathy, we're bearing witness And that helps every single human. That's part of the human conditions, part of the human condition. And we also know that in our empathic practice, if someone's being heard, it means that we're taking them seriously. And that's also part of the human condition, a desire to be taken seriously. Building empathy is encouraging. It helps your members, your athletes, be the best at who they can be. So there's 3 techniques then, more skills. I think the magic number today is 3. I promise Matt and I did not plan that, but it's all about 3 today. And I guess in hockey, we'd call it a hat trick. The 3 techniques to use empathy as a motivator. So what you can actually do, more skills, is you can use affirmations. You can avoid something that's called the writing reflex, which is a big deal. And you can also put yourself in a place of following. So what I mean by affirmations, it's because you're coming into this conversation, this place of communication, and you're bringing genuineness with you. You're a genuine person and you're trustworthy. Your affirmations for another person are grounded in truth and helpfulness. And what you're doing is constantly seeking. It's a practice that you build. You're constantly seeking and intentionally acknowledging out loud a person's strengths. Part of the human condition is we will never grow tired of hearing of things that we're doing great, our strengths. You will never have a place where you're telling somebody too much. Constant affirmations increase empathy. So not only are you doing it for yourself, it's double-sided, you're building your empathic stance by practicing affirmations, but they're benefiting the person that you want to be with, and you want to be in this conversation. And even if the conversation is tough, and even if you have this fight or flight, like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, that's okay. It's part of that thought pattern and the emotions that go with what we're thinking in our patterns. So affirmations is a practice to do. It's certainly at the core of social work. Social workers globally are taught to look from a strengths-based perspective at the clients they serve, at the communities they serve. So we're constantly saying, okay, yeah, I can see some things that are some improvement areas, but gosh, there's a lot going on here that actually is really strong. And tuning in to strengths builds strong people. The other thing is a concept of the writing reflex. So we all got into coaching. We all get into sport and athletics to be that person to help, right? To be the mentor, to get the winning team, to share our own successes. Sometimes that overrides us in our decisions about how we behave. And that is something that we call the writing reflex. We want to make things right because we are leaders and we are mentors and we want the best. We are genuinely there to build greatness. And so we want to hurry up and make things okay. And when we are reflective of that, we understand that knee jerk to make things right is a diss. It's a diss to you, a disservice to you, and it's a disservice to your team members. Because what it does is it's not empathic. It's actually the opposite. It's actually shutting another person down and their opportunity for change and growth. So it's a strong urge, and it happens to us all the time because we have the right heart and the right soul to make things good. But we have to stop ourselves and say, is it my place to fix this problem? Is it really my place? Which tends to that concept of non-possessive warmth. So there's ways to check ourselves with trying to make things right all the time. And the one way you can do that to start out with is when you go into conversations, you can anticipate how a conversation will flow and that there may be tension, and that's okay. You're a leader and you're going to be in conversations that are tense, of course. But before the conversation, you're thinking about how this might go. And you're going to check yourself to make sure that you're not putting yourself in a position where you're making everything right when your group members can do that for themselves. And they can make the decisions because they are the expert of themselves. So sports social workers know that we're not the expert of anyone. And coaches know that. And leaders know that. We have to remind ourselves that our teams and our athletes are the experts of themselves. And sometimes they have to work through tense situations as well to grow and to know what they're thinking, to know what they're feeling, to know how they're behaving, to live through that and not you fix it for them. So that will help. Another strategy to avoid the writing reflex is when you're in a conversation to actually take a few deep breaths, to give yourself some time, to actually say, I'm going to slow it down. Because a lot of times when we're in conversations that are tense, our blood pressure's up, isn't it? So we're in tune with how we're reacting. It typically goes into that mindful space. Okay, I got to slow it down. And if we don't slow it down, we might be tempted to just make everything right the way that I want it to go. But if we take a few deep breaths and slow it down before and during an action and an interaction, we are giving the space for empathic response. And when needed, another thing you can do that is completely legit is to, in a conversation, to step back and say, oh, for instance, you know what? I want to think about this in a different way. Let me just step back for a minute. Let me redirect myself. If I feel like I'm not behaving in comportment with my values at that moment, you can stop yourself and say out loud in the group, hold on, I need a moment. Let me think about this for a second. Let me redirect myself. Let me figure this out for 10 seconds. You can do that and give yourself the space. Not only are you showing empathy toward yourself, but you're showing empathy toward your listener, the people in your conversations, by giving them space as well. It's a win-win. So you want to avoid the writing reflex. The other thing that's a skill to build is called following. And this is really about, it's giving yourself time to observe. So not always be that person that's the number one directing everything, the number one leader in the group that's saying, that everything has to flow from my direction. It's actually stepping back and following at times. And this is a purely empathic stance because you are saying, you know what? My athletes can lead too in this discussion. My athletes are the experts of themselves. I want to learn more about how they would proceed. Instead of me giving that direction, whether it's how the conversation's going, whether it's how we're gonna move forward, whether it's how we're gonna fix something, you're saying, I give you the space that we come together. And when you do that, you show that you are an empathic listener, open to change. And you're showing and modeling for your athletes and your families and your coaches, everybody, a way to move forward together in a positive stance. And isn't that what it's all about? That's what it's about. So those are 3 skills. I want to just review very quickly. We went over 3 levels of awareness. We talked about thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. We looked at 3 critical conditions that you can work on yourself, and that is genuineness, warmth, and understanding. And then we looked at 3 techniques to get to building empathy as this place of change. And we know that we looked at all sorts of like ideas about moving towards recognizing strengths, saying it out loud, affirming those with the people that we want to be with, that we're not going to knee jerk, try to fix everything, that we're going to fight that writing reflex we all have. We all have it because we chose this area, and that we're going to allow a space for following at time. Understanding those 3 is part of building your skills for the art of listening. When you're in this place, your ears are wide open. They have to be. Matt.
I will bring us home. So we've got just a couple of slides left and we'll get through them pretty quick. But the one thing I wrote it down on my sheet of paper that's sitting next to me, because this is a phrase that I use quite a bit with my athletes, is winning is a byproduct of these types of things, right? So winning is not defined, and I've never defined in my coaching life winning as a win-loss record, right? So, I mean, that's certainly a metric that individuals might use. But for me, winning is, do you help your athletes maximize who they are as athletes and as individuals? So, and if we're able to really demonstrate our engagement with the listening process, we're going to see more successes and more victories along the way. So winning really, to me, is a byproduct of the stuff that we've just gone over and the stuff that's been talked about in all the different locker room chats that exist out there. But certainly when we try to summarize sort of the key concepts and takeaways from this, the listen to athlete is a confident athlete. They feel like they've got individuals that care for them and individuals that they can trust. We know that listening also bridges the distance between us and the other individuals that are around us. It allows for us to share a common purpose, to share common values, and to respect differences that exist amongst each other. We also know that these unshared thoughts that our athletes are walking around with are diminishing to them, right? We need to provide that safe space and that safe platform for athletes to be able to voice the challenges that they're experiencing within their day-to-day life. And we know that when athletes feel listened to, that they feel enthused, they get excited, they feel motivated to come out to practice, they're more apt to give everything that they have in a competition, because it's no longer just themselves. They feel a responsibility towards the greater good, because they know that it takes all of us together to ensure that we're going to have the athletes that are physically healthy, mentally healthy, and socially connected to the world that is around them. Go ahead to the next slide, Stacy.
Mm-hmm.
So listening is far more than we realize, right? I think obviously all of us have walked away from this presentation with many different things in pairs of 3s, like Stacey said, that allow for us to build our own toolbox of things that we have available to us. I also think it's important to realize that all of us can continue to build upon our listening skills. Mm-hmm. So this is one of those lifelong learning projects that we engage in and day out. There's going to be moments to where we ourselves don't necessarily feel like listening, and we're going to have to find ways to fight through some of those challenges that we've got in our own lives that might prevent us or block us from being able to connect with others. And the gift of our attention really is the thing that athletes need more than anything. So, and whether that's the gift of our attention when it comes to the expertise that we provide as coaches, or the warmth that we can provide, or the genuineness that we can provide, but our attention ultimately makes athletes feel connected and feel like they are a member of the team or the organization in which they're competing for.
Excellent.
So social media aspects, you've got their access to all the different Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn accounts, Facebook accounts that we hold as the Alliance of Social Workers in Sports. Our next session is entitled Straight Talk on Athletes' Mental Health and Wellness. Dr. Kratz and I are looking forward to being able to come back in October to share information about that. And then I believe we got one final slide, just a list of our references. And as Stacy said, this PowerPoint presentation belongs to you all. So you use it as you feel necessary, and use it in ways that you think can promote good of what it is that each one of you are going out day in and day out trying to support. And we deeply appreciate the time that you've given us today. We look forward to our ongoing relationships with Norman and with members of the Sport for Social Change Network. And I will reiterate what I said at the beginning. Stacy and I are always willing to answer emails and provide whatever support and resources that we can. And Norman, I don't know what time we've got for questions, but I think Stacy and I can stick around for a little bit to answer anything that people might have.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll take some questions. If you want to ask a question, please raise your hand so that we know to come to you. And you can also use the question and answer box at the foot of the page. You can put questions in there if you don't want to speak, just want to write them, you can do that. Thanks for that session, Stacey and Matt. That was really, really good. I now know that when my wife says to me, I don't want you to fix things, I just want you to listen to me, that I've obviously got that writing reflex. So that's clearly something I've got to work on with her, if not other people. Also, my kind of thought about sport is that sport does an incredible amount of good. And, you know, that's why one of the reasons why I've bridged from sport to sport for development, because I do believe in the power of sport to do good. But we also know that sport can do, you know, terrible bad as well. And one of the high things that was highlighted around the Tokyo Olympics was and probably heightened by the COVID pandemic, was this whole issue around the mental health of athletes. And you know, some fairly well-known athletes coming out and, you know, saying that they weren't being listened to, that their mental health was being affected by sport. I'm also very interested in safeguarding in sport, you know, stopping non-accidental harm occurring in sport, and it clearly is happening more than we realize, and probably as a result of coaches not listening or facilitators not listening. But I'd like to ask you one question just to move on, and that is that the skill of listening is an important life skill. And you've given us a lot of advice about how to develop our lives, that particular life skill. But in the Sport for Social Change Network, we're working with young people and we're trying to change, or not change, but we're trying to develop their life skills. And I'm just wondering if you had any tips on how our members could actually, with the young people they're working with, improve their listening skills.
Well, right off the top, and I know you have some to add to, Matt, but, you know, we believe in social learning theory and we believe in modeling. And I think that especially with young children, we know that that modeling begins in the home, and sometimes it's great and sometimes it's challenged, but we can be the model. So when we come to a space and exhibit genuine care, that's a model for our participants, and they are going to pick that up. When we bring the right traits to these relationships, the ones that we value, that we say are helpful, that are good for our children, good for youth development, then that's the first step. We have to be that first level, and that's social learning theory. What were you thinking, Matt?
I was just thinking, in a lot of the youth sport engagements that I've had, a lot of it boils down to the coach being willing to share vulnerabilities to demonstrate that it's okay to talk about difficult concepts or things that are going on in your life. And I also think making sure that in every practice or session that you have, providing opportunities for individuals to feel like they can freely share. Sometimes we get into these athletic settings where everything's so jam-packed that we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, and we don't actually ever take, even if it's 5 minutes, to do just a check-in to see how everybody's day was, and to have individuals share things that happened to them positive today or challenges that they faced. And I do it every single day at practice. This is with college students, but I mean, at the beginning of practice, they have to all share one thing that they're grateful for, and at the end of practice, they all have to share one thing that has been a challenge for them today, and what sort of some steps that they're going to take to try to address those particular challenges. And it can be sport related or non-sport related, but just 5 minutes of the course of a day can ultimately model what it is that we talked about throughout this session and provide individuals that platform to share their voice. Because a lot of kids, especially depending on cultural backgrounds, don't always feel like their voice should be heard. Yet we want to hear it, because in order for us to be able to best help them, we have to be able to understand what are the unique challenges in this individual's life and what are the things that make each one of these athletes special.
I love that, Matt. I can just see you out there right now, and what you're doing is getting them to actually examine their thoughts. And with that, they're naturally going to go to feelings, and then you're even saying, okay, so what am I going to do about it then? So you're taking them down the path, and that is excellent modeling for a healthy lifestyle. So fabulous. Did you know, Matt?
Every now and then I get something right in life, Stacy. It's not every day, but every now and then I get lucky.
I hope
Okay,
that was
folks.
helpful. Yeah.
I'm going to throw it open. Do we have any questions? Would anybody like to ask a question? Zane, I don't quite know. I can't see everybody, so I don't quite know, Zane, whether you can take that from your end, or do they have to write it in the question and answer box?
While we're just examining that, one thing that I always think about and like try to keep myself in check is, are we listening differently depending on gender? Or if we don't know someone's gender, like how are we engaging in that listening? And how does it relate to how we treat people when we think about gender? Because we know, like Norman, what you're saying, especially females in certain situations have been so oppressed and abused. And I'm wondering, I'd like to just explore that more about how we treat different genders. Yeah, especially in this time when we're trying as leaders in our fields to be so open to difference, right? Something, food for thought for all the listeners. Yeah.
Okay,
Matt,
we don't appear to have any questions coming through. That might just be because the technology is not quite helping us do that. But I think we'll give it a wrap now. I think it's been an outstanding session again from you, Stacey, and from Matt. What we will do is encourage those who are listening today to actually share the webinar with their friends and their colleagues, so that we get as wide a distribution of this as possible. And I'll ask Zane to send out the link to the recording of the webinar. Once he's managed to have a look at it and maybe edit it. We're getting some very positive comments in the chat box about the session, which I think is great. In particular, I think if I can just find this one. So Donnie Jurgens was saying some great practical ideas to improve communication. Thanks. I think a good way to affirm is not only acknowledging other strengths, but also creating opportunities for people, e.g. players, to demonstrate their strengths. And then Warren Clark saying, thank you, Stacey and Matt, for this presentation with info that can be for our own growth as well as supporting others. So, some very positive feedback there from the participants. And as I say, please, folks, when you get the recording, it'll be up on YouTube. Please share it with as many people as you can, so that we can spread the word throughout the sport for development sector. Matt, Stacey, thank you very much again. I believe we'll be meeting in a couple of months' time for another one of these sessions, and we look forward to joining you at that time. And hopefully, I think it's about mental health, isn't it? It's about strengthening mental health, and I think that in this day and age, and in the COVID pandemic, I think that's a really important issue to be addressing, and we look forward to that session with you.